Hey everyone! Welcome to Everyday Grace Stories. Before we begin today's heart-touching story, we'd love for you to take a moment and subscribe to our channel if you're new here. That way, you won't miss any of our upcoming videos filled with inspiration and kindness. And if you enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a like, share it with your friends, and leave us a comment below. We truly love hearing from you. Your support helps us keep bringing you more beautiful stories that can touch hearts and change lives. James woke up that morning with a weight on his chest, a mix of nerves and hope that made it hard to breathe. He lay there for a moment in the dim light of his small, run-down apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling. This was supposed to be the day everything changed. This interview wasn't just another opportunity, it was the opportunity. The one chance that could pull him and his daughter out of the endless cycle of scraping by. Slowly, he sat up, trying to quiet the storm of anxiety in his stomach. The floorboards creaked under his feet as he crossed the room and picked up the blazer he had hung on the back of a chair the night before. It was secondhand, and though it had seen better days, he had pressed it carefully until it looked as close to new as he could manage. He stood in front of the cracked mirror in the hallway, tugging at his tie and trying to steady himself. His reflection looked tired, older than his 32 years. The weight of responsibility had etched lines into his face. But there was also determination in his eyes. He whispered under his breath, as though saying it aloud would make it real. "This is it. This is for you, Emma. Today is going to be different." From behind him came a soft, sleepy voice. "Daddy." James turned to see his daughter standing in the doorway, still clutching her worn teddy bear. Emma was only 6 years old, but her eyes carried a wisdom and hope far beyond her years. Her pajamas were too small, the cuffs frayed from wear, but she didn't seem to notice. She looked at him with admiration, as though he were the strongest, bravest man in the world. "You look nice," she said with a shy smile. "Are you going to get the job today?" James knelt down in front of her and smoothed her messy hair. He forced a smile, even as doubt gnawed at his chest. "I'm going to try my very best, sweetheart. And if I do, maybe we can get that pink backpack you've been wanting for school." Her face lit up like the sun breaking through clouds. "Really? With sparkles?" "Sparkles and everything," James said, his voice catching a little. The truth was, he didn't know if he could keep that promise. But he needed her to believe in something, and maybe if she believed, he could too. Emma hugged him tightly before letting him go. James glanced around their apartment one more time before they left. The fridge had only a few items left, bills were piled high on the counter, and the rent notice he had been dreading sat where he couldn't ignore it. This job interview wasn't just about moving forward, it was about survival. They walked down the street hand in hand, the early morning light spilling across cracked sidewalks. James planned to drop Emma off at a neighbor's before heading to the bus stop. The city was waking up, full of rushing commuters and impatient cars. Every tick of the clock echoed in his mind like a reminder that time was running out. He couldn't be late. Not today. And then fate intervened. Just as they neared the bus stop, James noticed an elderly woman a few feet ahead. Her grocery bags had split, sending cans and apples rolling across the pavement. She was hunched over, her frail hands trembling as she tried to gather them, but people streamed past her without a glance. Businessmen in polished shoes stepped around the mess. A young couple looked over and then quickly looked away. It was as though she were invisible. James's chest tightened. He looked at his watch. His bus would be there in less than 10 minutes. If he stopped now, he might miss it. If he missed it, there was no way he'd make it across town in time. He felt the panic rising, his mind racing through excuses to keep walking. But then he felt a tug on his sleeve. Emma looked up at him, her wide eyes filled with innocence and certainty. "Daddy, we have to help her," she whispered. And just like that, his heart broke. Because he knew she was right. He had promised himself that no matter how hard life became, he would raise Emma to be kind, to see people, to care. What would he teach her if he walked away now? If he showed her that ambition mattered more than compassion? He would gain a job maybe, but what would he lose in her eyes? He let out a slow breath and nodded. "You're right, baby. Let's help." They hurried forward. James scooped up cans and fruit while Emma chased after a runaway apple. The elderly woman looked up at them with tears of relief. "Oh, bless you," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't think anyone would stop. James smiled faintly. It's no trouble. Where do you live? Let us carry these for you. She explained she lived just a few blocks away, and James didn't hesitate. He lifted the heavy bags while Emma carried the smaller items. As they walked, the woman spoke softly about how lonely she was since her husband passed, how her children lived far away, how she struggled with simple errands. She thanked them again and again. James listened, but his heart was sinking. Every step toward her apartment was a step away from his chance. By the time they reached her building, James knew it was too late. The bus was long gone. He forced a smile, handed her the bags, and wished her well. She tried to press a few crumpled dollars into his hand, but he shook his head firmly. Take care of yourself, ma'am. That's enough. As they turned to walk away, Emma slipped her hand into his. I'm proud of you, Daddy, she whispered. Those words cut through him like a knife. Proud? How could she be proud when he felt like he had just ruined their future? He had chosen kindness, but at what cost? That night, after putting Emma to bed, James sat at the kitchen table staring at the stack of bills. His heart felt like it was collapsing under the weight of failure. He buried his face in his hands. Maybe I'm not meant to win, he muttered. He thought of his late wife, how she had always believed in him, how she had asked him to promise he would take care of their daughter. He wondered if he was letting them both down. Emma padded into the room, still holding her teddy bear. She climbed into his lap and wrapped her arms around him. You're my hero, Daddy. You always help people. That's what makes you the best. Tears stung his eyes. In her eyes, he wasn't a failure. He was enough. And somehow, that gave him the strength to get up the next morning and keep going. Days passed. James threw himself into small jobs again, hauling furniture, mowing lawns, delivering groceries. He did whatever he could to keep food on the table. But the dream of a steady job seemed farther away than ever. Then, one ordinary morning, something extraordinary happened. James was standing in line at a diner, hoping to apply for a dishwashing job, when a sleek black car pulled up outside. A woman stepped out, her presence commanding attention the moment she entered the room. She scanned the diner, then her eyes landed on him. You're the man who helped my mother last week, she said, walking straight toward him. James blinked in surprise. Your mother? She smiled warmly. Yes. She hasn't stopped talking about you. She told me how you carried her groceries when no one else would stop. She also told me you missed something important that day because of her. James swallowed hard. I missed a job interview. The woman extended her hand. My name is Catherine. I'm the CEO of a company downtown. And I believe people with integrity, people who show kindness when no one's watching, are exactly the kind of people I want on my team. Come see me tomorrow. James could hardly believe it. Was this real? Could a single act of kindness truly change the course of his life? The next day, he sat in Catherine's office, nervously fidgeting with his tie. She didn't begin by asking about his qualifications. Instead, she asked about him. About Emma. About his struggles. James spoke honestly, telling her about losing his wife, about raising Emma alone, about working odd jobs just to survive. He told her about how every decision he made was for his daughter's future, even when it cost him everything. Catherine listened quietly, her expression softening. Finally, she leaned forward. Do you know why I started my company? Because years ago I was where you are now. I was a single parent, overlooked, dismissed, struggling. Someone took a chance on me. Now it's my turn to take a chance on you. James, you're hired. Tears blurred his vision as he shook her hand. He could hardly form the words of gratitude. That night when he told Emma, she squealed with joy and hugged him so tightly it nearly knocked him over. See, Daddy? You helped someone and someone helped you back. In the months that followed, James poured his heart into the job. He showed up early, stayed late, and worked harder than anyone. His kindness and integrity became his greatest strengths. Catherine often told him, it wasn't your resume that got you here, James. It was your heart. Every night, as he tucked Emma into bed, James thought about how one act of kindness had changed everything. He had missed his big interview, but in truth he had gained something far more valuable. A reminder that kindness is never wasted. It may cost you something in the moment, but it creates ripples that reach farther than you can imagine. So if you're listening to this story, remember, Opportunities don't always come through perfect timing or polished resumes. Sometimes they arrive through compassion, through grace, through the courage to stop for someone in need. James's story reminds us that acts of kindness create unexpected opportunities. And sometimes the very detour you think has ruined your plans is the path that leads you exactly where you're meant to be. Ethan sat frozen in his chair, his heart hammering in his chest as the teacher laid the graded exams face down on each desk. Around him, classmates shifted, some smirking, some already whispering with confidence that they had done well. The air smelled faintly of chalk and pencil shavings, but to Ethan it smelled like failure. Again. He stared at the paper when it slid onto his desk, face down, taunting him. For a moment he dared to hope, just a flicker, that maybe this time it would be different. Maybe this time he hadn't failed. But hope shattered the moment he flipped the page. A red 42% glared back at him, circled in ink as though mocking him. His chest caved in and his face burned hot. He shoved the paper into his bag before anyone could see, but it was too late. Someone sitting behind him whispered, "Man, he bombed it again." A couple of kids laughed under their breath. Ethan pressed his lips together, refusing to let his emotions spill out. He had promised himself after the last test that he wouldn't cry again, not in front of them. He had learned to wear a mask, to shrug it off as though it didn't matter, even though it mattered more than anything. Because behind the mask was a boy crushed by the weight of expectations he couldn't seem to meet. The final bell rang, and students flooded out of the room, laughing, shoving each other playfully, their relief obvious. Ethan stayed behind for a moment, pretending to gather his things slowly. His hands shook as he shoved his books into his backpack. The classroom was almost empty when he finally left, walking down the hallway with his head down, the noise of chatter and slamming lockers swirling around him like a storm he wanted to escape. The truth was he wasn't lazy. He wasn't careless. He worked harder than most kids knew. Late nights spent rereading chapters until his eyes blurred. Mornings waking up before the sun just to squeeze in extra practice. But no matter how hard he tried, the grades never reflected his effort. His father, a stern businessman, had little patience for excuses. "You're a Simmons," he would bark. "Simmons don't fail. Do you want to embarrass this family? Do better." Ethan carried those words like chains around his neck. That day when he left the building he didn't head straight for the bus. He lingered in the hall, moving slower and slower until finally he stopped near the janitor's closet. The school was emptying out, but something about the quiet hum of the floor buffer coming from inside the closet gave him a strange sense of comfort. He leaned against the wall, dropping his bag to the floor, and tried to swallow down the lump in his throat. The closet door creaked open, and out stepped Mr. Carter, the school janitor. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his dark skin lined with age, and his eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen more than most would ever understand. He wore the same faded work shirt he always did, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, hands callous from years of labor. He noticed Ethan slouched against the wall, trying to look invisible. "You okay there, son?" Mr. Carter's voice was calm, deep, like a steady river. Ethan straightened quickly, embarrassed. "Yeah, I'm fine." Mr. Carter didn't press. He simply leaned on his broom and gave Ethan a long, quiet look. It wasn't the kind of look that judged or pitted. It was the kind that saw right through the walls Ethan had built. And for some reason that made it harder to breathe. "Fine," Mr. Carter repeated slowly, as if testing the word. Then he tilted his head. Funny thing about that word. Folks use it when they're anything but fine. Ethan's throat tightened. He opened his mouth to deny it, to insist again that everything was okay. But the words wouldn't come. The silence stretched between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Finally, Mr. Carter set his broom aside and gestured toward a bench nearby. "Come sit a minute. No rush." Ethan hesitated. He didn't know why he wanted to sit, only that some part of him was desperate to. So he did. He sat down stiffly, his backpack at his feet, while Mr. Carter lowered himself onto the bench beside him with the patience of someone who had nowhere else to be. For a while neither spoke. The hallway was nearly silent now, the after-school chaos fading away. At last Mr. Carter spoke, his tone gentle. "Bad day." Ethan let out a bitter laugh, though it sounded more like a sigh. "More like a bad year. Schoolwork." Ethan nodded reluctantly. I don't get it. I study harder than anyone I know, but when it comes to tests I just fail. Every time. My dad says I'm wasting my potential. My teachers think I'm lazy or not paying attention. And everyone else just laughs. His voice cracked and he quickly rubbed his eyes. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just stupid. Mr. Carter was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the floor. Then he said softly, Son, don't you ever call yourself that again. Ethan blinked, startled by the firmness in his tone. You hear me? Mr. Carter continued. There's more than one kind of smart. Tests don't measure all of it. They measure one tiny piece and sometimes not even well. You ever try to measure the sky with a teaspoon? That's what tests do. Ethan frowned. But my dad, he doesn't see it that way. He just sees the grades. Mr. Carter's eyes softened. I know. Some folks only see numbers. But numbers don't tell the whole story. I've watched you, Ethan. You think no one notices, but I do. You help other kids pick up their books when they fall. You say thank you every time I hold the door. You sit with that boy in the cafeteria when no one else will. That's not laziness, son. That's character. And character goes further than any test score ever will. Ethan stared at him, stunned. No one had ever said anything like that to him. Most adults only saw his failures, his mistakes, his shortcomings. But here was this janitor, this man everyone else overlooked, telling him he was more than his grades. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a small flicker of hope. But what if I never get it? Ethan whispered. What if I keep failing? Mr. Carter leaned back, folding his arms. Then you keep standing back up. You keep trying, not because of the grade, but because of who you become in the process. You want a secret, Ethan? Life isn't about never failing. It's about what you do after you fail. Every time you rise again, you're building strength no test can measure. Ethan swallowed hard. The words sank deep into him, like seeds planted in dry soil. Over the weeks that followed, Ethan found himself seeking out Mr. Carter more and more. Sometimes it was after class, sometimes it was while the janitor was sweeping the gym floor or emptying trash bins. Mr. Carter never lectured him, never scolded him for not being enough. Instead, he listened. He shared stories of his own life, of struggles he had faced, of jobs he had lost, of moments when the world had tried to tell him he wasn't good enough. One afternoon, Mr. Carter told him about the time he had been rejected from the military because of a test he failed. They said I wasn't cut out for it, he said with a shrug. But I knew better. That test couldn't measure my will. And here I am. Life didn't end because of it. I found another way. Ethan soaked in those words. Slowly, something inside him shifted. He began to see his failures not as proof of weakness, but as stepping stones. He still studied, but when he failed again, and yes, there were still failures, he no longer spiraled into despair. Instead, he remembered Mr. Carter's steady voice. Stand back up. You're more than a number. Months passed, and while Ethan's grades didn't skyrocket overnight, his confidence grew. He began to speak up in class, to ask questions instead of staying silent. Teachers noticed his persistence. Even his father, though still stern, began to soften as he saw Ethan's determination. But the real change was inside Ethan. He carried himself differently. He no longer looked at himself as broken. And all of it traced back to that quiet man with the broom, the one no one else noticed, who had seen him when no one else did. Years later, when Ethan stood on a stage holding his high school diploma, not at the top of his class but proudly in his own right, he spotted Mr. Carter at the back of the auditorium, smiling faintly, leaning on his broom. Their eyes met, and Ethan's chest swelled with gratitude. Because he knew the truth. He hadn't just learned math or history in those years. He had learned resilience. He had learned that worth is not defined by numbers, but by kindness, integrity, and the courage to rise after every fall.